So today we're going to be comparing 9 different dip bars. So we have the FitnessKit bar, we have Gravity Fitness, then we have ThenX. Also we have 2 bars by BarManiaPro, and then we have the Gornation bar, Eric Flag, RaMaSS, and the Gorletic bar. So what is important when you want to buy a dip bar? In our opinion, the grip is very important. So we're talking about the grip feel, but also about the thickness of the bar. Also the overall stability of a bar is very important. And lastly is the height, because actually this influences the exercise variety of a bar. And we would like a dip bar also to function as a static bar, but of course they're always going to be less wide than an actual static bar. So if you're looking to mostly do statics, then we would advise you to check out our static bar comparison. And also with all of these bars, of course, it's very nice to do some weighted calisthenics, but there are not many differences here, so we are not going to go into depth. But of course, with all of these, you can use a weight vest, and on this one, you can also use a dip belt. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first up is the ThenX dip bar, and ThenX, of course, is an American-based company founded by the one and only Chris Heria. And this one, of course, you can see that it has a wooden grip. It is 40 millimeters in diameter. And if you check this out, it is already a very nice grip. I really like it. And when it comes to wood, this of course takes up your sweat. So this is very nice because you will have to use less chalk. Even if you start sweating, you won't start slipping. And when it comes to the stability of this one, there's actually something special about the ThenX bar, because this one has a connection plate between the 2 dip bars. So this makes it much more stable for instance, exercises where you're gonna push outwards, like for instance handstands, and also when you are doing rows on one of the bars, this also makes it much more stable. Right now we only have it connected with the hand screws, but actually they come with some extra screws, but I'm not sure how much more stable this will make it. And actually there's a downside of the extra screws because it takes some tools, and I don't think you'll ever use those in between your training. So I think it's much easier to just use the hand screws so that you can also easily take only one bar away and then for instance use it for some statics. So right now there is still a little bit of outwards movement, but definitely not so much. And later we'll be testing it out without the plates to check it then. With bent knees, this is of course possible, but now with the connection plate, it's actually also quite stable like this. So now we took off the connection plate, so let's test it out like this. All right, so definitely still feels stable, but of course now you can tilt it to the side, so this is not beneficial for when you want to do handstands on the top, for instance. Of course, with bent knees, it's still quite possible, but if you straighten your legs, yeah, it's definitely much less stable. But of course, if you use the plate, there's one disadvantage, because you have to choose one of the widths that it allows, but usually there's always something for you, and we would just always leave it on for the extra stability. So now when it comes to the height, with dips, of course, I do have to bend my knees like with all of these dip bars, but it's definitely still nice. So I definitely have to tilt my head to the side. And also, if I do a back lever raise. So overall, I really like the wooden grip, and also this bar is quite stable, but if you put the connection plate on there, it is actually super stable. So we would just leave it on for the extra stability. The only thing for me, this one could use a little bit more height, a couple of centimeters would be enough. But actually, I do really like this dip bar. So next up is the Gravity Fitness dip bar, and Gravity Fitness is a UK-based company. This one doesn't have the wooden grip, but a black powder coated steel grip, and I always like this grip. This one is actually 38 millimeters in diameter. All right, actually feels super stable. It has like feet which have 2 sides. One is shorter than the other. So basically, I would always put the short part inwards, because then you can push outwards when you're, for instance, doing a handstand or a dip or anything on the top, and then it's going to be more stable. This one doesn't have the connection plate, so actually you can definitely tilt it to the side. So it would be nice if it had that. All right, with bent knees, completely fine. Well, actually, yeah, when you do it with straight legs, it definitely wobbles way more. So with that in mind, it is definitely a stable bar. And when it comes to the height, actually this one is 94 centimeters high, so a little bit higher than the ThenX bar. And also with this one, you can actually change up the height, but honestly, I would never put it lower, because I think the height will be actually quite nice. And if you put it lower, theoretically it will be more stable, but honestly then I would just buy like medium parallettes or something like that. All right, so a skin the cat is definitely very doable on this one, so it's actually very nice. But if you do a raise, a back lever raise or front lever raise, you still hit your head on the floor, but I do definitely enjoy the extra centimeters. So also for dips, the height is definitely very good. Overall, I really like the grip of this bar, and also it is actually very stable, but it would be even more stable if it would have the connection plate. I prefer the extra height of this one compared to the extra stability that you get with only the sideways exercises, like for instance the rows or your handstands, but I prefer to be able to do a skin the cat or a back lever raise instead. So next up is the Gornation dip bar, and Gornation is a German company, and this one of course also has the black powder coated steel, and it's 14 millimeters in diameter, and I always like this kind of grip. But actually an even better grip is when you put grip tape on it. So if you have grip tape, we would always put it on there for your extra grip. All right, so right now this is actually a super stable bar, but again, this is because it also has the connection plate on here. Now we have it at its narrowest, but of course you could go wider than this, but for me, this is actually very nice. So with bent knees, the rows are very nice. And with straight legs, actually, it can move if you want it to, but it is super stable. So again, with the connection plate, super stable. So let's take them off to check whether it's still going to be stable. So for dips, of course, it's still very stable, but if you want to tilt it to the side, you can. So for instance, if you want to do handstand on top of this one, then it is going to be very sketchy. Right now, it definitely wobbles much more than when you had the connection plate on there. So we would basically always leave it on. This one, again, like ThenX, is 91 centimeters high. And that means I again have to tilt my head. And I hit my face on the floor when I do a raise. So basically this one gets the same verdict as the ThenX bar, even though that one had a wooden grip. This one with the black powder coated steel or the grip tape is super nice. It's a very stable bar, and definitely if you put on the connection plate, which basically we would leave on all the time. But one thing, we would prefer it to be a little bit higher, because for my height, I still hit my head on the floor when doing a skin the cat. So next up are the RaMaSS dip bars, and this one also has a black powder coated steel grip, which is 39 millimeters in diameter. So it does feel very nice. All right, so I immediately noticed that it is quite low. I can still do my dips on it without a problem, but I do get closer to the floor than I'm used to. The feet in comparison to the height are quite nice actually. The height is 80 centimeters, so this is much less than the other bars. So now I'm very curious what will happen if I do a skin the cat. Okay. This is just ridiculous. Okay. All right, so honestly, another thing that's actually in the way when you're doing your skin the cat or back lever is this, because this is quite narrow together, these two bars, and this is the lowest bar I've tested out. There's no way that you can do a skin the cat or back lever raise comfortably. It is a stable bar though, and it doesn't have the connection plate, but I don't feel like it needs it. But let's check out a row to be sure of that. Okay, so even with this, I do feel my elbow is kind of hitting the bar, and let's try it with straight legs. Yeah, I mean, now it definitely starts tilting to the side, and this is really just in the way. So yeah, even though it does have nice grip and it is quite a stable bar, it is just very low, and because of that, we wouldn't recommend it. So next up is the BarManiaPro dip bar, and BarManiaPro is a Dutch company. And with this one, also it's made of black powder coated steel. It has a very nice grip. And besides that, the diameter is 38 millimeters. So first thing I noticed was that actually the grip width on this is quite wide. And this is because we have the connection plate on here. We have it on the narrowest setting, and for me, this is already too wide, and of course for you it might be different, but I would not put these plates on here because of that, so let's take them off. All right, so now it's already much better, and of course now you can easily change the width however you like it to be. And of course, because there's no connection plate, now there is sideways movement. So a handstand or rows are going to be less nice on this. Forward stability is quite fine. Let's try out a row. As with most, if you bend your knees, it's fine. But this just moves way too quickly. So rows with straight legs are not so nice. So these bars are actually 92 centimeters high. So let's test out whether that's good enough for Skin the Cat. So I definitely have to tilt my head. And I also touch the floor with my face when I do a back lever raise. So overall, I do like this dip bar and I really like the grip of it, but honestly, it does have some problems that the other dip bars didn't have. So for instance, if you use the connection plate at its narrowest setting, for me, it is still too wide, so I would basically never use it. And without it, it's still a quite stable bar, but again, I would like it to be a little bit higher so that I wouldn't hit my head on the floor when doing a Skin the Cat. So basically, it is a nice bar, but for this comparison, it just doesn't make the cut. So BarMania actually has two dip bars, and this one also has the black powder coated steel, so it is a nice grip, and it is also 38 millimeters. So this bar is quite stable when you're doing dips, but it does again have the same problem as the other BarMania dip bar. When you have the narrowest setting on the connection plate, and for me, the dips are just a little bit too wide. So this is not nice, and for that I would never use it. It is nice though that you have this option, because if you want to do straight-legged rows, or if you want to do handstands on the top, it will give you a little bit extra stability. So for dips, this one definitely has a nice height, and this one is actually 93 centimeters high, so it's just 1 centimeter higher than the other BarManiaPro bar. So now let's test out a Skin the Cat and a back lever raise. Alright, so Skin the Cat is actually quite doable, and when it comes to the back lever raise, I still hit my head. So out of the two BarMania dip bars, this one is definitely our favorite. It has a very nice grip. It is a super stable bar, even without the connection plate. So far we have seen 91, 92, 93 and 94 centimeters high. This one, out of the ones with the connection plate, it is the highest, but the Gravity Fitness bar is a little bit higher. And also the connection plate on this one compared to the others is not so nice. It's not perfect. But if you want to do all of your exercise and you don't mind those sacrifices, then this is your jack of all trades. So next up is the Eric Flag dip bar, and Eric Flag is a French company, and this one again has black powder coated steel, and it is 38 millimeters. So let's check out the dips. So it doesn't have a connection plate, so I can just adjust the width. All right, feels quite stable to all directions actually, so not too bad. Also the grip of course is nice. It does seem quite low, and actually I know that it is 90 centimeters high, so this is definitely one of the lower ones. Okay, definitely low. So yeah, with both of those exercises, it's not so nice. So bent knees is doable. All right, so normal rows are not so nice. So even though this one doesn't have the connection plate, it is still quite stable, and also the grip is quite nice. But honestly, for us, again, it should be a little bit higher for it to be nice for most exercises. So we don't really like this one when it comes to this comparison. So next up is Gorletic, and Gorletic is a Spanish company, and as you can see, they work with wood. So this one has a rougher kind of wood grip than the ThenX one, so I actually really like it. And also the millimeters on this one is quite thick, so it's 43 millimeters thick. That feels super nice. And of course I can move it to the side, but when I'm doing those exercises, it does feel very stable. Of course, it doesn't have a connection plate. When it comes to the height, this one is actually 91.5 centimeters, so it's a little bit higher than the first two bars we discussed. But actually, with this one, it does have a lower bar as well. So for some exercises, so the Skin the Cat, for instance, the bar might be in the way. So we will be testing that out. All right, so this is definitely not ideal for Skin the Cat or for raises, but it is so far quite usual. with these bars. Of course, you can do it with bent knees, but when you do it with straight legs, it definitely tilts. It is, of course, nice and high for doing your dips. So actually, of course, because you have this lower bar, it is in the way, but also you get to do some extra exercises. So you could, for instance, even do a handstand on these. All right, so that is quite nice. And of course, you can also use it for push-ups. So if you really prefer wooden dip bars, and this one is definitely not bad. It is quite stable, it has a very nice grip. And actually, when it comes to the height, it is also fine for doing your dips. But because the bar is in the way, SkinTheCats are very difficult to do. You, of course, get some extra exercise on the lower bar, but honestly, we would just do them on the floor or on some parallels. So basically, this one also won't win. So next up in a league of its own is this unit by FitnessKit. And FitnessKit is a German company and they create fully weatherproof products. So basically this one you can just leave in your garden without a problem. It also has a very nice grip. It is steel, but not per se powder coated. It does feel more smooth, but in some way it has a very nice grip and it has a diameter of 43 millimeters, just like the Gorletic bar, so quite thick. So let's test it out. So this one is the first where I can basically straighten my legs fully when I'm doing my dips. So this is actually very nice. This is also a very stable bar actually. You don't feel much wobble to the side and definitely not to the front and back. So of course you can see over here you have a bar. This means that you can't really decide on the width of the bar, but for me this is actually quite a nice width. Of course this one is super high. So this one is actually 121 centimeters high. It also has a bar on the bottom, but honestly with this one, I don't think it will be a problem when doing a SkinTheCat. So let's try that out. All right, you can hit this bar after doing a back lever raise, but for the rest, you can easily do a SkinTheCat. So this is very nice. So when you're doing rows with straight legs, actually the bar is quite high. So I don't really like it as much. So I would bend my knees and do them like that. Of course, you could also do rows like this. But actually, then you could do it with all of the other bars as well. So the big plus about this one being so high is that actually you cannot just use a weight vest for weighted calisthenics, but you can also use a dip belt with some weights in between your legs. So this is actually super nice. So if you are a street lifter, this is definitely a great dip bar. And basically it only has two disadvantages. So this bar being here actually prevents you from putting the dip bars at different widths. And besides that, it is actually very expensive. So it's 335 euros. And this is basically 3 or 4 times the price than the other dip bars. So this is definitely a lot. But besides that, this is definitely a great dip bar. So before we conclude, we found out that 94% of our viewers don't actually subscribe. So subscribe so that we can make more and better reviews for you with more and more partners. So to conclude, we have 4 winners over here. And first up is the FitnessKit bar. And this one is super nice and high, which makes it easy to do some weighted calisthenics with a dip belt and some weights. So this is great. It is also a very stable bar and it has a very nice grip. One downside is that you cannot decide on the width of the bar because this bar is over here. And other than that, this one is also quite expensive. So it's 335 euros. And then I'm 185 centimeters tall and I'm mostly focused on being able to properly do dips and lever-based exercise on these bars. So I basically need the highest one. And apart from this unit, it will be the Gravity Fitness one that is the highest. And this one is actually also the cheapest out of all of these winners. It is 80 euros, so this is definitely a very nice option. And lastly, if you're less tall than I am, or you want to be able to do a handstand on the dip bars, then you'll need either the ThenX bar or the Gornation one, because both of these have a connection plate, which makes it much more stable. And they also have a decent price. So the ThenX one costs 144 euros and the Gornation one is 150. And on both of these two, we can actually get you 10% off with our discount code CWW10. So click the links in the description or here to support our channel. And then we'll see you in the next one. Have a good day.